Someone else who might be thinking of going and get another job at the moment is the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, who I think on the scale of like political turmoil, I think she's sort of turned to embattled at this stage, which is getting pretty high up on the scale, because today, 3 months ahead of time, we got the decision, the reasoning from the High Court on their decision that these immigration detainees couldn't be kept indefinitely. It wasn't meant to drop until February, but obviously there's been so much interest around it that they dropped it today. And one of the most interesting pieces out of their findings is that the High Court has basically explicitly said to the federal government that the only problem here is that there is no legislation that allowed you to do what you were doing. What you were doing as the government was detaining people, and that is unconstitutional. But what is constitutional is legislation that allows people to be detained on a preventative measure if they are a danger to the public. Now, we've been talking about this ever since the decision came down a few weeks ago. Why wasn't there legislation sitting there ready to get these people detained? James Patterson, the opposition Home Affairs spokesman, said exactly that today.
It's not often that the High Court goes out of its way to provide advice to the Parliament about what it can and can't legislate, but in this instance, there's no ambiguity. They've given us enough excuses already about why they can't act. Now the test for them is, do they have legislation ready to go?
It honestly could not be clearer. The High Court is saying to the government, here is the piece of paper, just fill it out, sign it on the bottom, and away you go. And they can't even do that.
And they've literally said nothing in this ruling does mean that you can't then just send these detainees out of Australia. That's all I needed to hear. I was like, OK, well, problem solved. Send them back to where they came from or elsewhere, just like Claire O'Neill tried to do in that initial meeting on the 29th of August, where she was already getting legal advice and literally said to them, can you hit up our Five Eyes counterparts to see if they can take this sex offender? Obviously, that didn't come off. But they also said that their ruling does not prevent them from being detained under another already existing measure. They were just like, just pull a different lever. They suggested some other applicable statutory basis, such as a law providing for preventative detention of a child sex offender. There are so many laws that they could have reached for to be like, OK, this is the one that we're going to try and utilise in this measure. I mean, you can't mean to tell me there's absolutely nothing in play. By all means, make a better one, but there are others already in play that you could have just been like, it's much like when any lawyer is bringing a case. They're like, do we prosecute it this way? Do we prosecute it that way? The government had so many options. It is literally eye-watering that they didn't utilise a single one. And one of the things that I don't like about this, I mean, it says they appear to have greenlit this system and therefore it's assumed that the government will go ahead, is that it entails the government then applying to the court if they want a preventative detainee type setup for anyone, must apply to the court. I don't like that idea. A, it takes more time as opposed to ministerial, just their own discernment, being like, OK, they've told me the case, yes, no. That's how it used to be.
Yeah, but the point is we can't do that anymore. The High Court has ruled that illegal.
It also clogs up the courts. Yeah, again, well, just change something. Make it not so.
Well, you have to change the Constitution. You've got to have another referendum because you've got to change the Constitution to do that.
No, but in the long term, like...
Yeah, I mean, look, you could tack it on to the next election, but you can't fix that overnight. Like, they've got to deal with what they've got in front of them.
Ministers do have the jurisdiction to make these captain calls all the time. We certainly saw that during COVID.
Yeah, but they made this captain call and the High Court slapped it down.
The bottom line is this. They've been putting off anything because they said we've got to wait for the High Court to release its reasoning for the decision. Well, now we've got the reasoning. So first thing tomorrow morning, if legislation needs to be introduced, it should be on the table. Yeah. Parliament are sitting.
Well, it should have been written done 3 months ago.
If, as you say, no legislation needs to be done, then there should be an application to the court to get these guys back into detention if they can find them, because some of them have gone missing. The other thing that Anthony Albanese should do immediately is he should organise a cabinet reshuffle for first thing in the new year and get rid of Claire O'Neill. As James Patterson pointed out, it's very unusual for the High Court not just to release the reasoning of its decision, but to prompt the government, here's some things that you could do to fix this. And that's not the first time this government has had to be prompted as to what to do. You remember Peter Dutton himself, while Anthony Albanese was overseas, again, it was Dutton telling the government, here's what you should do, here's how you can fix it. So introduce the legislation or the court order, whatever you've got to do, and get a new Home Affairs Minister.
Well, they've been so far behind the 8 ball that it's not even comical. Like,
but I mean, who from their team would you put forward for that job?
Chris Bowen. wait, no. Linda Burney. No.
Okay, how much work do you want to make this?
No, I'm going to say, the one bloke who actually showed a bit of leadership in all of this was Richard Marles, who, in the absence of Albanese, came to the table after all those amendments were put up.
It was leadership, or he just said, what should I do, Mr Dutton? And he just did whatever Mr Dutton said.
I maintain that if Albanese were in the country, it would not have happened in the way it did. I reckon it all came down to the fact that Marles was there and he eventually said, bugger it,
but
put my foot
Albanese is
down,
only a
and we're going to do
phone
it.
call away. What do you think would have been so drastically different? His team would have appeared not
because
inept.
we've seen the way Albanese behaves as Prime Minister. He would have dragged his feet. I think the fact that Marles was
dragging
there...
their feet.
Well, yes, they're dragging their feet in terms of getting some legislation up, but I think the fact that Marles was sitting in the PM seat on that day contributed to the fact that they ultimately agreed to every single one of those.
Even if Albanese was in the country, could they have got him from the Qantas Chairman's Lounge to Parliament in time for that debate?
He wouldn't have been there. The dude just goes to Parliament for a holiday, right? He spends all his time overseas. And then he comes back and he goes to Canberra and he's like, oh, this is nice, relaxing, lovely, happy times.
Well,